The hardest part of this video was saying fairly instead of fairy 20 times. The new sequel thing to Fairly Odd Parents is out that no one asked for or cared about. Oh my god, they made Poof hot.
Hey kid, I'm
Okay, 10 out of 10, no notes, this show is perfect. But if I were to give some of my thoughts, I think Fairly Odd Parents, A New Wish is a show that simply wasn't on my radar for the longest time. As I don't have cable, I'm also kinda IP'd out, so hearing that another beloved franchise from my childhood was getting a reboot didn't exactly fill me with joy. But then people started talking about it online and seemed genuinely invested for reasons that weren't lust. So I figured I'd give it a shot and watch it, and yeah, it's good. Like, we're talking certified banger. As I watch New Wish show a level of reverence for the show that not even the original had, as this thing acknowledged the problems that the series gained as it went along and course corrected them, adding to the richness of the world and helped create a show that I genuinely like. So let's talk about it. Now, the first thing you'll notice about this show is the new animation style. Gone are the days of 2D, now we live in an age where 3D can copy its style and mostly get away with it. It's genuinely impressive how this show is able to replicate the style of the original while clearly doing its own thing, from mimicking the frame rate, limiting the angles from which we see the characters, to a lot of the big expressions and throwback effects to make this show feel like it is a continuation of the original. On a technical level, this show is incredible. That said, I do think I prefer the original 2D. This is probably my nostalgia talking, but it's a thought that I can never keep out of my head due to the show's liberal use of 2D art in its title cards and photos, so you can never stop thinking about what this show could have looked like, and highlights an uncanny valley aspect to this show's art style. As yeah, there are 3 models pretending to be 2D, so that sense of depth makes certain design choices feel a little bit off versus what they could have been if they were just on paper. Things like Dale Dimidone's hairline looking just so far back versus how, and for lack of a better word, normal it looks when you convert the style to 2D, or Jorgen, who overall looks amazing, but the angle of his muscles, his chin will look odd at times when he starts moving around as you realize that this image isn't flat, it's just pretending to be. Which isn't a terrible thing, but for the aesthetic they're going for, it kinda does break the illusion. Thankfully, this issue only really pops up for certain characters and on certain angles. Though that said, I think this show is gorgeous, and frankly, the hair textures alone make this show's style more than worth it. I mean, just look at Hazel's hair. In 2D, this would just be a flat color with a little bit of a gradient, but here, it feels so alive, so textured. It's a level of detail in life that you could just not do in any other medium other than this one. And this extends to lighting as well. There's just so many times while watching this thing that I just had to pause the screen to be impressed at how the lighting is flexing here sometimes. And to use Hazel as another example, notice how in the fairy world, just her hair has 2 different colors depending on where the light is coming from. Or how Foop's square head, you can clearly tell how each side has a different quality of light depending on the angle. It's a little thing, and for a cartoon minimalist like myself, I do think it's not technically needed. Sometimes like, okay, doing a little too much, but I can't argue with how pretty it looks most of the time. And that while the older style is kinda timeless, in my memory, you look back at old rips like, oh yeah, this thing has aged, but New Wish's look is a modern update that's gonna look modern for the next 100 years. This will not be dated in 5 like so many other 3D shows. But to move on to other things that this show did well, let's talk characters.
Sleepover safe. What the
As far as main characters go, Hazel is an utter delight. She's kind of the polar opposite of late-stage Timmy. Rather than being depicted as a lazy and selfish kid who would trap everyone in a time bubble for 50 years, Hazel is as selfless and as good-natured as a kid can get, with her positive energy being infectious rather than grating. She feels like an actual kid with all the strengths and flaws that come with it, from thinking she's too mature for her friends leading her to become a teacher's pet, to her stubbornly sticking to routine when her brother finally comes back. She might not have a Doofenshmirtz level sad childhood like Timmy did, but she's still a kid in a rough time and place in her life. Being in a new city, in a new school, her brother just went off to college, which I think makes her fairies feel pretty earned. As the show has traded outright misery for relatable kid problems, which that is its main audience, so they're gonna gel with it. Hazel is adorable, goofy, her wishes going wrong are more a product of ignorance rather than malice, which provides a nice contrast to Dev when he gets his own fairy.
I wish the spirit of Viozalia would come back to life.
Oh boy.
Another thing that makes Hazel fit so well as the protagonist of this show is New Wish's comedic philosophy. In the original, a lot of jokes tend to just boil down to someone suffering. We can talk all day about all the stuff that hasn't aged well, but I think it's interesting how the different angles the show takes lead to different characterization for its characters. OG Oddparents was great, but the find funny and bad things happening led to the show leaning into the characters being their worst selves over time. Timmy's selfishness, Cosmo and Wanda fighting all the time, the other characters ending up not really mattering. Meanwhile, New Wish's kinder take on things, focusing more on the absurd and fantastical elements rather than things just being, oh look, that's weird, ha ha ha, allows New Wish to make Hazel a beacon of positivity. It allows Cosmo and Wanda to go from just being unhappily married to just being a loving, if a bit confused couple. I love what the show did with these two so much. And also, the other kids in Hazel's class actually matter and they feel like a real supporting cast, which is the biggest change from this show from the old. This is to me again a consequence of the show's different approach to comedy, creating room for everyone to flourish rather than being trapped being the butt of a joke. With there being no better example of this new approach than Hazel, and especially when she's contrasted with Dev.
I'm glad you all learned something.
Now Dev is probably the most interesting character in this season. He probably deserves his own video as his arc is pretty much the crux of New Wish's serialization, with him going from bully to whoopee to dick friend till he's the worst and finally owning up to his mistakes. Dev seems like just a bully at first, but then you see his relationship with his dad and you understand why he's like this. But importantly, the story never really gives him a pass for acting like this either. Hazel does, cause she's a saint. However, the story knows that Dev's actions are bad. He's a kid, but he is being a petty bully who disproportionately lashes out when things don't go his way. And these are also flaws that he never really confronts till the end of the season, which makes him a fun character to follow and also highlights one of the flaws of the whole fairy godparent system. As giving lonely kids wishes is great and all, but it's having a friend and companion that really makes the whole thing work. So if a kid struggles at making friends and treats them more like a tool than a person, then there's nothing that Fairy can really do to help the guy, as they're wish granters, not therapists. Hence why Perry never really could have helped Dev, and how this kid was probably gonna spiral no matter which fairy he got. Also yes, Poof renamed himself to Perry, and he's great.
You know, perfection is subjective. You might want to ask for a specific flavor.
Personally, I thought Perry was going to stand out a little bit more given how much he blew up the internet when he appeared, but in practice he kind of ends up getting pushed around by Dev or he's just not showing up. He is a very fun mix to the cast. I love the idea of another kid having their own fairy, as it provides a whole lot of great storytelling opportunities. Perry himself is a great straight man to all the nonsense going on around him, and yes, he is a young adult floundering with his first job. Of course I can relate. All that said, I'm curious to see what role he'll play in the future seasons. He's no longer Dev's godparent. So is he just gonna hang out with Hazel? We'll end up seeing. Yes, his new design is genius, blending together his parents' design, and he also got Cosmo's original salesman personality, making him a character that actually works, and performing the miracle of not making me hate the fact that Poof can speak.
Yo, man, this gonna be so cool, man. We're gonna be bumping, man, trying to help the boys out. You know how we do it. You feel me, dog?
I still can't believe that's real. New Wish is honestly a great show. I respect how it's able to be a continuation that stands on its own, waiting until like the midway point of the first season before really starting to lean into throwbacks. Cosmo and Wanda getting back at Vicky for Timmy was divine. The anti-fairies and Ira were perfect for the roles they played. Jorgen, still one of my favorite characters, but New Wish gave itself time to actually build up and flesh out its new cast, as these are the characters that should matter, as they are the ones we're going to be spending the most time with. Genuinely, when Dev started to become a good guy, I was kind of worried that Win and Jasmine were just gonna get kicked to the sideline. But no, they stuck around, stayed relevant, and the season ends in a place where they know the secret, and they're gonna keep knowing moving forward, which honestly I think really works for this story. As in the original, Chester and AJ, they always ended up feeling like extras. The hard rule, though they can't find out, kept Timmy's life so separate, these characters are always destined to fall off. But having it be known allows us to keep these characters in the loop and go on crazy adventures with them rather than having them be apart. I also appreciate the limited levels of serialization that this show has. This isn't just one-off adventures with only seasonal gimmicks to differentiate what season this is. There's a clear sense of character relationships deepening and changing as things go on. While this approach doesn't work for every show, I think this one threads a needle between being mostly one-offs while having enough of the occasional connective tissue to make it a joy to follow week to week. Overall, I really enjoyed A New Wish. It's a fresh of breath air from a show that I truly thought had been milked dry. Works and updates elements elements that either didn't work in the original or were just flat out wasted, creating something funny, compelling, and all around solid. I'm so happy this show was released like once a week, else I know people would have simped for Perry for like a weekend and then have forgotten him. Truly, it's tragic how many shows never get a chance to find their audience. It's either boom or bust, and so many gems are lost along the way. But thankfully, Very Odd Parents: A New Wish wasn't one of them.